Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ima Essen. I'm a cultural planner with STEPS Public Art. I'm excited to have some tea with you. A little bit about the organization. STEPS is a Canadian charity and social enterprise offering services in public art management, hoarding exhibits, cultural planning, artist capacity building. We run charitable programs that support artists and foster vibrant and inclusive communities. One of those programs is called From Weeds We Grow, which is what brings us here together today. I will share a little bit more about the overall project and the artists joining us today, but first I want to take a moment to acknowledge the sacred land in which this project is rooted. So Roundtree Mills Park is at the northwestern end of the city. It's been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. And the traditional territories include the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Métis Nation. So this territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources in and around the Great Lakes, taking only what is needed and ensuring that that dish is never left empty for others. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, who are the treaty signatories, and the Williams Treaty signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Today, this meeting place of Tekaronto is home to a large, active, and diverse urban Indigenous community from many nations across Turtle Island. And we're grateful to use this land to generate creativity. Whenever I do this, share these acknowledgements for us, I'm reminded of a conversation with Lindsey, who you'll meet in a moment, and in which she reminded me that we're all treaty people, whether we're settlers or for generations or newcomers, and these agreements carry weight and an obligation for all of us. And it is my hope that nurturing conversations like the one we're going to have tonight will bring us closer to reconciliation with Indigenous communities and nations and help us decolonize our own minds and practices. So as a public art organization and as a representative of STEPS, I recognize that we are very privileged to work on stolen and unceded lands. We're actively working to unlearn colonial structures and move towards reconciliation. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will see that we've shared a link to native-land.ca, which is a great starting point. It doesn't give you all of the information, but it does offer an entryway into the Indigenous territories that we currently reside in, as well as the treaties and historical and current communities, as well as the languages spoken. Thank you for listening. It's very important we take the time to do that. But as I mentioned, this session is part of From Weeds We Grow, which is an interdisciplinary public art community project. It started in 2020 and explores Toronto's Rexdale and Humber Summit's relationship to urban green spaces. We use things like workshops, land-based arts, sessions like this to really engage folks. And since the first year, we've returned year after year for various crafting activities, as well as walking tours, landmarkings like ground murals, and performances, all rooted in Roundtree Mills Park. This session is lovingly referred to as Strawberry Tea Time, a conversation with Indigenous artists. So today we're going to sit with Lindsey Lickers, Mushkiiki Nibi Kwe, Star Nahwegahbo, sorry about that, Jennifer Alicia Murrin, and Shawn Howe, hopefully for a nourishing and refreshing conversation to explore the pressures experienced by Indigenous artists, community workers, and teachers, all of which tend to be emphasized during this month, this being National Indigenous Peoples Month. So this Tea Time Chat is the first part of the 2024 From Weeds We Grow, Braiding Ourselves into Creation, and lays the foundation for this year's creative and land-based explorations of Roundtree Mills Park. A little bit of a background, the decision to pre-record this session was a collective and deliberate one and represents one way of honoring the space and time needed for Indigenous artists, communities, and individuals to care for themselves as well as others, especially during the month of June. So I've already introduced myself. My name is Ima Essen with STEPS Public Art. I have a colleague, Sukveen is assisting us today. He's one of our program assistants. But I'd like to pass the mic to our esteemed artists to chat a little bit about themselves. Star, I'll let you take it away.
Hi, hello. I'm Star Nahwegahbo. I'm an Anishinaabe
on my mother's side, and Scottish and English from my father's side. My mother is from Manitoulin Island, from Ondak Omniconning First Nation, which is part of the Robinson Huron Treaty. But I've been living in Toronto for 13 years now. My background has been in social service work. I burnt out, and then I decided to go back to school to nurture those artistic gifts and then combine the two together to just create a more sustainable career and work for myself. My biggest role is being a mother, and so I guess I'm an interdisciplinary artist, so I do a lot of different work, audio recordings for audio tours along the Humber. I've done um, audio meditations, just a lot of mixed media, video. I do crafting as well, poetry. I'm all over the place. Wherever there's a story to be told or medicine to be shared, no matter what medium that is, I like to play around in that. And I'm happy to be here today. Oh, should I pass it to somebody?
Feel free to pass the hot potato.
I will pass it next to Lindsey.
No, language. So ani scano Mushkiiki Nibi Kwe and Dishnakaz Mizikandodem 6 Nations Mississauga Kindinjaba. So my English name is Lindsey Lickers, and I'm Turtle Clan, originally from 6 Nations of the Grand River, as well as have matriarchal ties to the Mississaugas of Credit First Nation, so identify as both Ongohoe and Anishinaabe. And yeah, I've been involved in From Weeds We Grow and for Steps, going on 4 years, correct, Ima? Yeah, 4 years. So it's been really amazing to watch this project evolve and grow, and really how the Rexdale community has really taken it as their own and really participated in even shaping the programming and wanting to continue having these conversations year after year. So that's been really great for me to watch. But yes, similar to Star, I'm a multidisciplinary artist, although primarily these days working predominantly within painting 2D, moved recently into installation work. So outside of Steps, I'm also an artist ambassador with the Downey Wenjack Foundation. So I've done a few legacy spaces in some of the main buildings in our corporate Canada, and doing reconciliation workshops and increasing awareness, doing that kind of work in that realm. And I also do a lot of traditional craft, beadwork, making a lot of regalia for people, but also bundle items. I actually just today was able to birth a drum I had made. So that was really nice. That was a nice day for me. And just to share with everybody what kind of, we were all asked when coming here to come and share stories, share space with each other, nourish one another, and also to, approach it in a very Indigenous communal-based way with our tea time, right? So I did notice that some of, my peers here had some cups. I'm not sure what's in them. I know I'll probably find out. And I went to go and make mine today, and I was actually drawn to something that I think is really symbolic of some of the things we're going to talk about here today. And that is, one of the things being, why we decided to record this, pre-record this and do this in this way. Because as Indigenous people and Indigenous artists especially, we don't really get the time on National Indigenous Peoples Day to really for ourselves, right? We're always giving. We're always kind of looked to give back to the community and kind of be all places at once. So for me, this year was the first year that I actually had that day off. since, you know, I can't even remember. And one of the things that I did was I actually was invited with my ceremony sister, who I've also co-founded a land-based organization with, to help her run and share teachings at the women's full moon ceremony in Innisfil, on the lake up there by Barrie. And so we had a beautiful day, and we had a group of 15 women who came together in ceremony, and it was just absolutely beautiful. So what I'm actually drinking today and what I brought was my moon water. So that's what was calling me to bring to the circle. So I think it's also really symbolic of the conversation, and that's very nourishing. And it just feels very, it feels really nice, right? To like finally be at a place where, you know, we can have those, you know, we can just be who we are, right? So, miigwech, yeah. I'll pass it over to Shawn.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. That was really nice. So my name's Shawn. My pronouns are they, them. I'm Ojibwe, queer, non-binary, neurodivergent, disabled person. My spirit name is Red Cedar Tree. I'm Wolf Clan. I come from Nahwegahbo First Nations, and I also have membership in Shubenacadie First Nations, Mi'kmaq territory. So lots of extended family who are Mi'kmaq. Born and raised in Toronto. Also moved away to like a little small town for a couple of years, and then returned back to the city in my 20s to study psychology. So I used to also do frontline social work, counseling, and so I've always been an artist, visual artist. I've always been painting since I was little, but more publicly and professionally within the last 5 years. So I'm a muralist, visual artist. I love painting and community work. So doing a lot of community work with Indigenous communities, health centers, with the youth. Did I leave anything out? And I love digital illustrating. So lots of things, love art, creating, being in community, and spending time here today with everyone is really, really nice. I also had the day off for Indigenous Peoples Day, and I swam all day. I'm a water baby, so I love swimming. I was just super happy. So miigwech, happy to be here. I'll pass it off to Jen.
Thank you. I think right off the bat, I should probably say, like Star, I'm a parent, and so you'll hear a little voice in the background, and that is my son, and my dad having a chat, and my auntie. So that's what's happening back there, and I apologize if it is too distracting. But I think, yeah, we wear many hats. And so, yeah, one of the most important hats that I wear is parent. But yeah, my name is Jennifer Alicia. I'm Mi'kmaq and also German, Irish, and Scottish. I'm from Nahwegahbo. I spent Indigenous Day back home. I just got back Monday night. And so I purposely went back home this year to spend time with family and just relax and be reminded of, you know, who I am and where I come from. And my son Odin had a blast. We have about 600 people in our community, and there's like no sidewalks or anything. So he was like running in the middle of the road, playing in the dirt. It was great. And so, yeah, I'm a multidisciplinary artist as well. My main arts practice has been poetry and spoken word. I've been writing poetry since I was probably about 7, 8. It started as therapy, and then, you know, eventually developed into something that I shared with folks. Yeah, I feel like a lot of the stories that I tell come from my memories and experiences from being back home. I've been here in Toronto for way too long. I've been here for probably like 20 something years. And I also have a background in social work as well. I went to school for social work and was on the front line at a drop-in center here in Toronto for a few years. So yeah, lots of different hats, and as us as humans are, you know, we have lots of different things going on. So yeah, just happy to be here, and yeah, thanks so much.
Well, that's great. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you for joining us and trusting us with your spirit and your stories. I think we're going to let this kind of take a natural flow, but why don't we start with talking about what kind of tea we have? I have a little wild orange ginger tea. I don't usually do this one. I don't know why I did. Maybe I'll figure it out by the end of the session.
I originally was set out to have boiled some strawberry in sweet water from the maple, the Enotic, but time got away from me today as I'm packing up and getting ready to go up north. So I went to my default, which is my favorite tea. It's a Bengal spice. It's very soothing and comforting and creamy and delicious. So. And it was just like a practical choice.
I have red raspberry tea. I put 2 bags in because I like a strong tea. It's one of my favorite teas. I drink it pretty regularly. Yeah, I really like it. It helps ground me, and it also reminds me of self-love and connecting with myself, and just connecting with my spirit. So I chose that one today.
So I am not drinking tea. I'm drinking coffee because I'm extremely fatigued. But I will say that in my backyard, I have like a little garden space where I'm growing St. John's wort, peppermint, and lemon balm. So I do have plans to make tea, but today was coffee day.
And as I mentioned, kind of got ahead of everybody. um, was the moon water, right? Just from this past full moon ceremony. And I just wanted to say too, I thought it was interesting. I didn't put it in my intro, but I'm a social worker. So we're all social workers and artists, which I think is really interesting, right? And I think that I don't think that I'm not somebody who believes in coincidences. I believe in, creation, creator really like putting people in, spaces that they're meant to be in. And I think that that's probably not by accident, but I find like in my experience, like I know a lot of Indigenous people, Indigenous artists that are also helpers, right? Like in some way. And I think that that also speaks to the importance of that connecting, right? Connecting to our communities, right? That's so integral to a lot of what we do. So I just wanted to point that out as in addition, since I've already talked about my water. And then I'm thinking too, about that, why just water, not tea? And again, we tend to, and I think a lot of people tend to underestimate the water, right? I know even I do. So I'm even thinking, that could also be just needing to replenish, because again, just going through doing those ceremonies and kind of the space and the places I've been in recently has been a lot of shedding, right? Shedding things that are no longer working for me, and bringing in things that are more aligned for where I'm going. So for me, I find the water, when I think about it that way, is very fitting.
I brought some too. I have it in the background there holding space.
Love that.
I'm on mute, but I also have my water as well. I also have like many drinks going at a time too. My water and my tea. And Jennifer, I also had coffee today as well.
I think something that's popping into my head, and I know when we chatted about what we were going to talk about during the session, we talked a lot about burnout. And I feel like maybe that's something we can talk a little bit more about. You've all kind of expressed burnout as related to your previous or current roles as social workers working in community. And I know we've chatted about each of your experiences as an artist as well. So maybe that's something we can chat a little bit about, like and especially as Lindsey mentioned, everyone on this call is a helper to some extent. Even just coming out to the park and sharing what you know with community members is helping or is being a helper. So I wonder how those things are interconnected, and if there are any ways that you can think of that say maybe steps or other organizations or even just individuals can help to mitigate those challenges. The burnout that comes from giving and teaching and balancing and mothering and all of those things. So I will mute myself, please. Just
Does anybody want to go first? I guess because I opened my mouth, I'll go first, I guess. Maybe I will just kind of, as I'm just like warming up to what we're speaking to, and when I hear other people speaking, I'll probably have a little bit more to offer. But in terms of burnout, I think, for myself, it's you're kind of navigating your own recovery and your own healing and getting back in touch with your culture. So there's like, you're doing a lot of work on top of doing a lot of work. So I think that's a huge thing. For myself, it wasn't understanding the impacts of trauma and that I was in survival mode constantly. So that's what led to just a complete deflation. And so, for example, like today, like this is a perfect way and strategy to kind of deal with being called upon often. So I spent Indigenous Peoples Day resting during the day, and then in the evening I caught the last little bit of celebration in Mississauga. I got to see the hallucination perform, so that was really awesome. But most years I'm working, so I don't get to kind of go check out any events. And it was really nice to be there and celebrate and just see like the hype, and the energy was nice, and just to be able to experience that as opposed to like always pouring all the time and giving. So I guess like, yeah, so going back to the format of today was just to have a just a conversation, tea time, like we would normally gather and chat, and that the accommodating that from on steps and to pre-record it, even where the pre-recording was supposed to be done prior to, and because of we all have stuff that's happening in our lives, and just to respect that was really nice, and it'll come when it's time to come. So um you know that helps a lot, that helps tremendously, and to be able to show up and be present. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there for now and just pass it along. Yeah.
I'll jump in. Just gonna really speak from my heart and just kind of speak to whatever's coming up, but I just keep coming back to the water. I think that the water has always been so healing for me in terms of burnout. So for me this year, and sorry, the background, I'm sorry if the noise is really loud too. The streets are a little bit busy, but I'm just this summer and really just trying to balance making sure I'm swimming, making sure that just the basics, drinking enough water, but really coming back to the water, swimming, being on the land. I think that it's so powerful. And one of the things I love to do is just swim, like I had shared, and just let the water just kind of like cleanse me or clear my energy. And it's always just been really fulfilling for me. So for me, it's the water. Yeah. And I really appreciate this as well for burnout in terms of, especially this month, having a virtual event that we could do afterwards is so needed. And I think a lot of organizations could really tap into this and maybe even forward thinking for 2025, just thinking about even September, thinking in different ways that people learn. And especially as a disabled artist, having this opportunity is so nourishing. So yeah, I think those things for me are really good.
Okay, I guess I'll go. Yeah, when I think about, my aunt is singing to my son right now. I'm trying not to laugh. In terms of burnout, I think for me, I tend to go to poetry and writing. Like that was my original way of kind of expressing myself and my emotions as a kid. I grew up as an only child. I have siblings now, but growing up, I was the only child, and also in a house where I saw a lot of things that children shouldn't be seeing or witnessing or experiencing, and that affected me. You know, that's I think a story that a lot of people can relate to, how the trauma affects you. And same thing, like I didn't realize that I was actually dissociating and in survival mode for most of my life. It literally took the pandemic where like everything was like frozen, stuck, we're at home, we need to sit with our thoughts, we need to just be still. And it was literally the pandemic where I realized that, hey, I haven't been checking in with my body. I haven't been checking in with like connecting my body and my heart and my mind. And so for me, like the way that I kind of work through that is through writing. Well, therapy. I definitely go to therapy, but writing. And, you know, writing doesn't have to be something that I share with everyone. It could just be something for myself. And so that is something that really helps me get through those tough situations, I guess. And sometimes I know this might sound strange, but sometimes I like to go to like a nearby park. I live by Taylor Creek in the east end of Toronto currently. And so I would go to Taylor Creek and walk until I find, like I'll walk into like the off trail bush area and just literally sit by a tree and just sit there. And just be present. And I know that might sound strange, but that is something that I find also helps me.
I don't find that strange at all.
I do
No.
that all the time.
Yeah, that's
I
what
do
I
all
do
the
in my
I'd be
weekend.
over there.
Like-
I'd be over there hugging the tree,
Exactly.
Yeah,
talking
people
to it.
walking
I
by,
sing to them. It's fine.
just holding on tight.
Okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm good in this space. I'm good.
I'd be like this,
Yeah.
and then like
Hey.
No, I love that. Yeah, you know what's coming to me is like, because I've been doing this kind of work for a really long time, and I don't know if it's just that maybe the spaces that I'm accepting, right? Like the spaces that I'm being called into now are changing and shifting because I've shifted, right? But like I used to see, and this is something I think is just a symptom of, the society and the structures that have been created, right? Is like hustle culture, right? Like constantly go, 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 go. And that burnout, like if you noticed it, you were kind of going against the grain, like how dare you kind of point out, right? Um, that's kind of what I used to see. But now, and again, I think this kind of goes into where I've kind of gotten to the place of where, because like historically, maybe me before the pandemic, right? Would have just, felt the burnout, and similar to my peers, right? Just like constantly living in flight or fight, right? Like with your sympathetic constantly always going. And I think that, we can connect that back to just a lot of our own historical experiences, epigenics, right? Intergenerational things that we kind of don't realize we're kind of carrying with us until something either bends or breaks and we have to look at it. But I did start to notice that when the pandemic happened, it was, again, I always look back at that time. Some people look back at that time as being really like, oh, what an awful period, right? Or like people would just like to forget about it. And then I'm kind of the opposite, as where I was like, that's probably the most rest I've ever gotten. It's actually one of the times that it was really in my face of the fact that I could not continue burning the candle at both ends, right? Like just constantly going, because my answer to the burnout would be just to keep going, right? And like really tap into that resiliency that Indigenous folks are very good at, right? But that's not necessarily good for our spirits. So I noticed that I, scaled back a lot of things. I say no more. And I also am more apt to, call out things, right? Because I'm sure, I don't like to assume, but I feel kind of safe making this assumption here. I feel like most of us here would have at least experienced that like last hour call before June 21st going, oh, we didn't plan for this, right? Can you help us out? Can you come do this thing? And it's not a small ask, it's a big ask. And I used to be really, try to teach people about things. And I've just gotten to the point now where I'm almost like, how long have we been on this journey together? You probably should know by now that we're very busy people. But more to that, if you were actually, walking your talk, you would understand too that our time, especially when it comes to storytelling, because again, the way I was taught is artists are visual storytellers, right? Carrying a lot of knowledge. My healer mentor, he talks about that all of the time around how the artists are the ones that ground some of that creative energy in the physical, right? So we ground spirit, we're bridges. So it's a very taxing, it's a lot of energy to be dealing with as a bridge to bring that information to those kinds of circles. So again, I think it really just comes down to that honoring, right? Like honoring the invaluableness of how we, what we bring to the circle. So I've gotten better at just saying to those people, in a kind way, but in a truthful kind way, right? You need to plan better, because myself and a lot of my peers and my people in my community, we're booked a year in advance. right? For good reason. And, you know, and then for me this year, having had the time off, now I could have done anything with my time, right? Because it was one of those things I had the feeling to just, do I want to just like sleep in? Because like I love my sleep, rest, do nothing, right? Because nothing is something. That's the other thing, right? Is we're conditioned to think that and feel guilty for resting our bodies or resting our spirits and our minds. And I've gotten into the habit now to nourish myself, to when I have a day where I do nothing, nothing is something and nothing is productive, right? So now when I have those times, I'm like, oh, I lounge out and I'm like, yeah, I just lay in it and be like, I'm so productive today, right? But this year I got invited by my sister to go do that ceremony, and I just felt like, yeah, that was the right thing. And I'll tell you, it was amazing. And I think this is also, you know, tuning into when we take better care of ourselves, we value ourselves more, then our outward physical manifestation reflects that. So now, you know, I've been a helper for a really long time. And anybody who knows like ceremonial helping, when you start off as like a baby shkabe, it's go time. It's like, it's hard work, right? And if anybody's gone to Sundance and you've been a shkabe, whew, it's a lot of work, right? So, but I've noticed that these years, and you know what, I will say this too, Steps does this really well, okay? And what it is I go to this ceremony and my sister and the community, the women that came there, and even the community that was there throughout the day, did nothing but nourish, right? I notice now I get like it's kind of weird for me, but I'm leaning into it. I almost get treated sometimes like a granny. Like people will like, hey, and I come help you take your stuff out. They want to help, right? But they're also just so grateful. Like the gratitude is very evident. It's there. And people just take care of, like, that's been my experience this last couple of years, showing up to do these things in the places and the people and the community, just taking care of you, right? And that just feels so amazing, because it's a lot of work, right? And especially like what we did in ceremony, like cleaning people off, helping people deal with grief, right? Helping people let things go, like as conductors and as ceremonial people, especially, and artists too, right? It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of work. And it's a lot of us giving of ourselves. So that's what I've noticed is what's been really beautiful. And that's, I think, an indication of how things are changing. That's how invaluable these conversations are to keep having, is that more people are getting it, right? I have lots of stories about working in, especially with, say, for example, corporate Canada, when reconciliation was just becoming a priority for that space. And I will be honest, it was brutal, right? And now, having the experiences I'm having, going into those spaces now, it's like completely different, right? So that's positive, right? But I think there's an understanding coming to, and I think it's not just for Indigenous people, but understanding that just people, right? We're not meant to function in that go all the time, right? We're more than just like cogs in a machine, right? And yeah, so I'll leave it there. That's kind of what I've been noticing. I could go on and on and on, but I won't. But that's been the positive thing that I've seen, the shift, is that I think people are understanding the importance of Indigenous folks needing nourishment, but also the reflection on them needing nourishment too, right?
Yeah, I think, sorry, I did have one thing I didn't really touch on the organizational part, which you just reminded me about, is, yeah, just like everything being compacted into June. And if you're Indigenous and queer, like June is just like such a wild month. But I think what STEPS is kind of doing. I know we're doing this pre-recorded session for Indigenous History Day month during June, but we're also doing events and workshops outside of this month. Like we're continuing on into July, August. And so I think that is something that I'm grateful for, because a lot of times, yeah, like people try to hire people just for June and then that's it. And then that's where the relationships ends. It's like transactional. And you know, like people need money. And so a lot of times that's not necessarily negative, because you are putting, you know, money into families and that sort of thing. But that's kind of where it ends generally. And so I think it's good that like STEPS as an example is building those relationships on a continual basis. Like Lindsey's worked with STEPS for numerous years. I've done some stuff with STEPS last year as well. And so like I think that's something that's admirable. There's always work to do, so I'm not going to say you're 10 out of 10 because I think there's always going to be room for improvement, but I do think that that's something that yeah, it's a good direction to go.
I'm on mute. So for just like small little tidbits, like organizations that I've worked for, even corporate, you know, they were sessions that they held prior to, so maybe months prior to, but then they highlighted it on the day of June 21st. And I thought that was like a really great strategy to implement, so you're not kind of bombarding people in that way. There was something else I can't remember, but yeah, just either ongoing relationships or not to yeah, message people last minute. Like I got the same thing, an email like a week before, can you come in and do a dream catcher? And I'm like, I don't even know how to make dream catchers, like and it was just like awkward. And I just never responded. I still have a relationship with them, and then we'll talk about that, but it's yeah, it does, those things kind of feel transactional, or at least just like, you know, you want to kind of plan ahead a bit, and things don't have to be exact on the date. Things can be highlighted on that day, that work that you've been doing up until that point or continue doing.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also saying no to a lot of projects, and relationship building is so important to me. And I luckily had the chance to do some work. Yeah, being queer and Indigenous during this month is wild. And I really appreciate the people who reach out in like December for June and actually really build that relationship, have conversations, as opposed to like the last minute, can you do this? But not only that, I think I really value connection and intention and purpose. So those things are also really important to me. I think that this month should really be for us. And so sometimes I think instead of which is great, like education is really great and asking us to come in and teach and certain things, but you know, sometimes it would be lovely to have organizations to even just say, we know you're doing good work, here's some funds, work with your community and give back to your community. Sometimes we're kind of often asked to do a lot of work for non-Indigenous people. And so I really challenge that and push back. Intention is so important to me. Like how are we feeling if we're only reached out during these times, right? What is the purpose of that? So to me, relationship building is so key in terms of also burnout and ensuring that those connections are sustainable and intentional, if that makes sense. Yeah.
This is making me think about some of the work that I'm noticing too, and again, could be where I'm at too. I recognize that is like you're saying, Shawn, like that intentional work, right? Like when places are able to answer my why, right? Like why do you want to do that? Right? And like what's the purpose of it? Right? Like how is this going to move your reconciliation plans like ahead? Do you have one? Right? Like what is your intentionality in doing that? And what I've noticed, like even just this year, at least for myself, it's like, okay, like we've done these things, we've done this education, this awareness. A lot of people understand. Well, I mean, maybe not. Now that I'm starting to say it out loud, I was gonna say a lot of people understand they need to do a land acknowledgement, but even that, I kind of still feel like, half the people that do them don't quite understand what that is and why, right? And again, that intention. But one of the things that I've started to kind of put out there is like, we've done this for a certain amount of time now, and we've been working on our truth, right? And there's certain things that kind of need to be happening in order to, because it's a process, right? It's a journey, and we're only just like at the tip of it, right? We've only just kind of started that journey, really, in terms of like if you're looking at it of history wise. So I'm always asking people like, so are you ready to dive deep yet? Right? Are you ready to actually start implementing some of these things? Because I know myself, I'm really kind of done with the surface level of these things, right? Like some of the questions I'm starting to ask as a side for people who are watching this that don't know that about me. But like within, my consultation work that I do in this space, a lot of it these days has been talking about policy, right? Like actually looking at the structures that are at play within your spaces. One of the things that I've been kind of putting in people's ears is like even language, how again, how what things are in place that kind of govern how you relate. Because if you want to actually do that meaningful work, that's also a place that it has to start too, is looking internally, right? And seeing what some of the things are maybe not working or not conducive to walking that path with us. One of the things I think about a lot is, which I've been kind of giggling about lately, and those that don't quite know me will know eventually, like I like to stir the pot a little bit with people and get them thinking, right? And so one of the things that I do a lot of, and I've been talking about recently, is like look at like HR, for example, right? Like the language of like human resources. And it's like, well, I'm more than a resource, right? As humans, we're more than just something to be cultivated, right? Something to be, again, it points to like extractive language. And so right there, you've already set yourself up for how you're going to relate to people internally, externally in the community, and how you're going to, in effect, interact with us, right? So that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for now for organizations to start looking at, is how do they actually look at some of those bigger questions of, what they've continued in terms of governing their relationships and how they build them.
And that just like benefits everybody. Like that's
Yes.
like
Yes.
my mind.
Yeah. While you were talking, I'm just gonna say one thing that popped into my head as well is allies. When you were asking like really intentional things about the organizational structure, and I think that allies, like the real work too is you're being able to ask those important questions, being able to have a voice and push back. In organizations too. I think those are invaluable to like burnout. Like I have some non-Indigenous friends who will push back. And when I'm exhausted or things like that, I'm just like, thank you. I cannot, sometimes I can't do those hard things that are really hard that you mentioned that need to happen. And that's so important, the work that you do. And that burnout too, the people who say that they're allies, that real work is like those hard conversations. And if you're willing to speak up on an organizational level, when Indigenous people aren't there, are you gonna use your voice in that sense? So I was thinking about that when you were talking too, because that work's really hard. Policy work, that is really hard. And so having allies is also true allies is so important too, to help you along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just looking at like how many Indigenous people are on your board, how many Indigenous people work for you. Do you have an Indigenous advisory council? And I know there's like challenges with those things as well. But even just looking at that, like how are you incorporating Indigenous people into your everyday programming? Like it doesn't have to be just the June thing, like we were mentioning. Yeah, and just like really looking at those policies as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have a real quick story. I don't know if we'll keep it in this or not. I'll decide later, but I had I won't name names, but just in organization where I went in and they had received a grant to do programming and had no Indigenous partnerships for that, and then called upon me. So I had to look at the proposal and I was like, okay, because I had previous relationship with them. However, it was different person. And so long story short, by the end of the project, there was this language being used of ownership of my work, and it was not only mine but another artist who is non-Indigenous. And and I kind of called it out to say like, hey, what is this, what is happening? I hope this is a miscommunication and just a poor choice of language. And then I was ghosted after that. So it was a really intense, and I was scared because it wasn't just my work. I had um, audio recordings from different folks in the community. So knowledge from elder that, trusted me to, share that in this event. And then you go back and then you ask again, can I share it elsewhere? So there's always this like consent throughout the project. And anyways, you know, I was, or you're already burnt out, like tired or whatever. And if it wasn't for that component, I most likely, like being tired, I would have just been like, ugh, whatever, like I can't even deal with it. But because I had a responsibility to that elder and to that knowledge keeper, I was like, oh, like I can't. So I basically reached out for help wherever. Like I just casted a net wide and far across the city, and thankfully people eventually responded. But I was so tired. Like my therapy sessions just like that invaded all of them for a little while. Like it was exhausting because you're just like it shakes you a bit. And there was threats of taking the other artist to court for their taking back their own artwork and all this stuff. This like just nonsense. And so by the end of it though, there was a resolution, and the city got involved, and then there was mediation. And the organization on the higher level was like, whoa, we didn't know this was happening. And so they recognize that they're not only for working with Indigenous folks, but within artists and contracts and just those things in general, that there was a big gap in their system. And so yeah, like I didn't have in the initial in the beginning any allyship, anybody to really like navigate that. So it was very exhausting on top of working, on top of being a mother, on top of all those things. So you're kind of like having to advocate and do that work. But luckily, it got to a place where um, the person that I came in contact with that used to work for the organization and um, uh, helped me to figure it out and just talked with me and real and assured me like everything I was doing was good and what happened was not okay. And then and they came to the table and they, you know, and now they're working on their policies right now to do that. So it is important to have that allyship, I think, what you were saying, Shawn, because you know if it was just my stuff, I honestly, like, I hate to say it, I would have just let it go because I was so tired. Like I had, you know, in around that time lost my grandmother. Like I didn't have time to deal with all that stuff. So it is important to, you know, like that's just negligence. Like that's an extreme case. Like, is a little bit extreme. Most of my relationships have been pretty good. You know, I don't want to discredit that. But you know, those things happen. That's on a more extreme level, but those things kind of happen on a micro level too. And little things here and there. But anyways, that's kind of what I was thinking of when you were talking about allyship.
You also, we're all just bouncing off each other. You're also reminding me, I think what we're also talking about too, Lindsey, you had shared, is contracts. I think that and where this is coming from, like as an Indigenous person, the way that we relate, I speak for myself, I think how we all relate is like on a spirit level as well. Like there's an aspect of spirit in our art or culture. So there are like cultural elements through and through and spirit, and there's a different level of art and how we connect with art and spirit. So, you know, I think oftentimes our art sometimes can be seen as like really extractive at times too. And this just made me think of having to read over those contracts of like ownership and control of your art. And, you know, whenever I read those things, it's kind of like it just hurts my gut, like intuitively, like it's just not a good feeling. So I think that even with burnout, organizations really need to decolonize, I guess the word, their contracts, their understanding of who we are, our art, how we engage with our art. There's that different level. So I would really like to like see organizations really tapping into actually looking at the wording and the language and kind of like those other areas in terms of contracts too.
This reminds me of so much while everybody's talking. I teach about this, right? It reminds me so much of like explaining and breaking down wampum, right, as visual language and treaty into like how you look at that from a policy perspective. Because when you look at that, because even just language, right? The Guswanta, right? Peace, power, righteousness, right? As the English translation. But power just in itself is just to show you, I think that's where they get that confusion. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's a complete misunderstanding of relationship, right? Because power to us is like collective power, at least how it was interpreted from our perspective as like an Ongohoe perspective. And power actually comes from everybody contributing to the circle within their autonomy and their uniqueness, right? And righteousness is that space of like coming to the circle with a clear mind, with a good mind, which actually attached to it is making sure that you're taking care of your mind and clearing your spirit of grief so that it doesn't cloud your judgment, right? And then, so yeah, it just makes me think about those kinds of things of like, you're 100% correct. And even contracts, right? Contracts, again, it's talking about relationship, but you could look at that completely differently and have it framed in a completely different way. And interestingly enough, Star, I've also had similar experiences to that of, well, again, won't name names, but some organizations deciding that because I worked with them, that I was not for some reason allowed to go and share that knowledge with another space. And essentially by way trying to claim ownership over the teachings. So what I said to them, and again, this is acknowledging that I'm in a very different space. And I'm kind of a little, again, pot stirrer in my ways. And so I told them, I said, okay, I said, if you want to do that, we can do this in a way. I'm going to show you how we would deal with this, right? So I invite you to come to Circle. We will smoke our pipes and we will get direction from spirit, and they will tell you what they think about what the resolution needs to be and what they think about the stories in this space. And you're 100% invited to come and deal with it with us in Circle. Got ghosted. Right? So there again, I mean, I kind of knew that was going to happen, but that's just, again, it shows that who's ready to deepen their relationship, right? And a lot of that too, it's all of the things we've talked about. It's the contracts, it's the way that we're relating, it's the language we're using, it's the mindfulness, the intention. But it's also what I've noticed is who is willing to be uncomfortable. Because there's an unlearning that has to happen. Like we talk about that decolonizing all of these structures. But what first has to happen in what I've seen is decolonizing the thinking, right? Because the way that at least I relate is through the Gaogoa, right? It's like natural law, right? So I'm not owned, in our teachings, I'm not owned by another person. I'm not even owned by spirit. I'm on loan, right? Like I'm on loan here. I'm here to relate. So as is everybody else. So I'm here to come in, in relationship and in equality. At least my teachings and understanding of why we're here. So, and again, too, it makes me think, and I don't know why this is coming to me, but I'm even thinking about something as simple as, even our animals, right? Like the way that people think about our animals, the way people think about the earth, the way that they think about everything. I can usually tell by talking to somebody if they're ready to relate in a particular kind of way based on how they see everything around them and even on how they see themselves, right? So that's where I'm kind of that's where I see like that change has to start taking place, and to really get people to start reflecting on, how is it that they relate to everything inside and outside of themselves. It's hard. It's deep work. So that's where my mind was going.
I had a question. I don't know what time we're at, but just maybe what are some of the strategies that you've used in your artwork to take care of yourself, to nourish yourself, accommodate yourself? Like for an example, like I know certain times for me are going to be heavy processing. So maybe I take on more work that I'm sitting outside, and I'll do tabletop murals with folks. And it's way nicer than just being inside of a building, or even inside the buildings though, and it generates conversations just very organically and nicely, and it's very soothing to my nervous system, which is to everybody's, to sit and color and then talk. So that's been one of my strategies of like implementing some of the work that I do, so I can work, so I can, earn a living, but also still provide to community and be a part of that, but also giving to myself. So I'm just curious what folks are doing.
This kind of like goes off of what everyone's been kind of saying, but honestly, the way that I see my art is ceremony. And so, like I'll put down tobacco, light a smudge, and just kind of let whatever comes through. So I'm constantly just kind of relating my art to ceremony, spirit, and just whatever I'm needing to process or to move through, I just kind of allow it to go through. And I think that has also allowed me to kind of keep that sacredness of art, as opposed to it starting to feel like work or things like that. I try to keep it really close to feeling that way. So for me, it's like always putting down tobacco and connecting before doing a mural, before doing art, and I'm always feeling fulfilled. It's awesome doing murals outside for sure, being on the land too. But I was relating to what you both were saying. Like I don't own my art. It's weird. Like I don't feel like I own it. Like obviously, yes, like I create it, but spiritually, there's moments where I'll be doing something and I'll look back and I'll be like, wait, how did this happen? And I think it's just like being really connected and using those medicines and connecting. Yeah, so yeah, keeping like art really sacred and not kind of getting caught up. And also having moments too, like me and my partner will just be whatever we want to be, making sure that not just doing art for work, but I'm still doing art in different ways, like for myself.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a few things that come to mind, because I'm primarily a poet, a spoken word artist. There's kind of like two stages to that. One is the actual production, writing or verbalizing of whatever story it is that I want to tell, and then it's the actual performance aspect. And then because of the nature, well, I shouldn't say everyone who's a spoken word artist does this, but I think I speak for myself, I really emphasize like telling your own story. And so when you are telling stories that tend to be a little bit traumatic, you have to find ways to take care of yourself, just because of, yeah, that's the nature of the work that you're doing. And I like to describe my poetry as love and rage poetry. And so I think you'll see right here, I have a whole container of rocks that I've collected myself from back home. And then my grandpa gave me his rock collection when he passed away. And so, yeah, sometimes it'll just be like having something like this beside me, or like maybe picking it up and like while I'm writing, because something might be triggering or hard, I'll just do that. And that's something that tends to ground me. And then I'll never go to a place where it's too much. Like if I'm writing something and like my heart starts beating really fast and my breath changes and I'm getting like hives, because that's what happens to me. I'll start to recognize like, hey, maybe I'm not ready to actually go to this place that I'm kind of the direction that I'm going in right now. And I won't go there. And I always tell people like to not, if you're not able to like, if you haven't created a space where there's care or support, like don't ever push yourself to go to those places until you're ready, or you have those sorts of, yeah, just supports or care, whatever that is or looks like for you. And then I find like when I perform my poetry, it's almost as if I transform into like a completely different person. It's like something takes over me. And like people say it all the time, because in my everyday life, I know I don't know you all very well, but I'm a very kind of like, I think people would describe me as like quiet, like the person that like is on the back wall, maybe a little resting bitch face, like just like this like person over here. But then when I perform, yeah, I feel like almost like spirit takes over and I literally like transform and become some sort of vessel. And then usually when I get off the stage, people are like just looking at me very confused, like, what? Okay, I've never heard you like speak like that, or I've never heard you like, I'm just like very shocked by that performance. Now I feel pressure to like put on good performances. But I just, yeah, I just feel like something kind of takes over. And I think also because of the nature of the kind of storytelling that I do, it's not like I don't primarily do it for therapy now, like my writing and performing, but there is something like cathartic and therapeutic about actually like getting up there and saying the words that you wrote, and having witnesses, yeah, be there to witness and just like hold that space.
I think for me, it's very similar of, whenever because essentially what's happening for me, and again, this is connected to like other stories. Ema's heard a couple of the stories that I've shared around how I've come to the understanding of like what creative energy is in connection to spirit. And essentially what we're doing is we're also we're giving, right? Like we're not extracting, but we're like expelling a certain level of energy every time we're doing that. We're giving of ourselves, right? So something I try to do is remember that I need to, after I've done that, especially if I've done that publicly, like I mean, people wouldn't necessarily know when I go out and I do, a workshop or a facilitation or a mural or whatever it is that I'm doing. I also public speak quite a bit, right? People get a perception of me in their mind of like that I'm very extroverted. I'm actually not. I'm the opposite. I'm very introverted. You wouldn't think that to talk to me. But once I've done what I need to do, even in ceremony spaces, right? Once I have given of myself, I go into my own space and I give myself the time and the space, right? To like recharge. I'm very mindful of that. I used to be bad at that. And that's how I realized really quickly that I would like expel too much energy and then I would crash and then I get sick, right? So spirit taught me that lesson over and over again that I need to stop doing that. So I stopped doing that. So now I also just I play. Like one of my favorite things to do is like go to an arcade. I love playing games, right? I'm a little bit of a gamer, right? And also, so I always take that time to like nourish the little me inside too and spend time with them. And another thing that I've noticed recently I've been doing, especially with my art, is understanding and being okay with the fact that when I create something, because again, I'm very much similar to you, Shawn, around like, I see that as like sometimes things come out of me where I'm like, I don't know where the heck that came from. Right? Like I just trust that spirit is guiding me to put something in something, right? And it comes out, it comes out how it's supposed to. And but I also recognize, and I noticed this, in the last few years, is when I go into public spaces or I share my art, I stopped putting the expectation on myself that I need to share everything. So there's a lot of things in my work that people would never even know are in there unless it connected with them. And that's okay. Like I've learned that I don't have to spill my guts out of everything that I know about what's in my work, right? And trust that if somebody picks something up and asks me a question, and if they ask it to me in a good way, and I feel and I listen inward, if I'm supposed to tell them about it, I'll get told I have to tell that story, right? But also I recognize and I take comfort in the fact that there's a lot of things that are in my work that are just for me or are just for my community, right? Because some people in my community will get something that somebody else with different eyes will look at it and it'll go completely over their head, right? So there's almost like a built-in relationship that's being communicated through my work. And it's connecting with whoever it's supposed to connect with. And I've just gotten to the point now where I trust that. And it also, I've noticed, has been, it's helped me have more balance, right? And not really play into my people-pleasing tendencies. So, and that's healing, right? Like that process in itself is very healing. And I'm very grateful for that. So that's a few things that I do. And again, too, trying to carve out time to make and create for myself, right? Like just for the sake of creating. This is the first summer. Usually I go to Sundance and I've been advised not to, doctor's orders from my lung issue. And I was kind of bummed about that, but I still took my 3 weeks off for the summer. And I'm just literally, guys, I'm going to paint on my deck or outside. I'm going to bead. I'm going to just like, go on walks with the dog, like go swimming, play. Like that's all I'm going to do. And it's like the first time I'm going to be able to do that in like years. So I'm really excited to see what comes out of that. But just remembering to take that time for us, right? To just sit and be in with ourselves and with spirit, right? So that's kind of what I'm doing lately.
Yay.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. And even sometimes too, like when you said play, I also thought like sometimes like there are things that don't carry like a specific meaning, or we're just creating art like to just have fun too. So yeah, really tapping into that fun and play is so needed. Yeah, those are some good reminders.
Well, it makes me think because a side note, I'm doing training with Dennis Wendigo for an Indigenous land-based psychotherapy. And if you're ever interested in taking that course, it's blown my mind phenomenal. But one of the things that we did this journeying inward activity. And one of the things that we were asked was like, what is one of the things that you've experienced quite a bit in your human experience, like on your earth walk, right? And for me, one of the things that, because again, if you got to know me a bit, and Ima knows this, I'm very much of the stars, which we all are. But I tend to spend a lot of time there, in the esoteric and in the quantum places, and in the stars. And so the human experience for me is actually very lonely and isolating most of the time, because I really feel my spiritness, right, of like actually being a guest here. I think more than a lot of other people do. And so we talked about that. We were asked to identify what that experience was mostly, and then tune into now most times when you tune into that, it's actually a reflection in the experience of your ancestors. And so the question that he asked us was, so if you were to tune into that experience of your ancestors, what would your ancestors want you to do when you feel that way? And the answer that came to me was to play. Right? Because our ancestors didn't get a chance to do that very often, right? They did at one point, but we spent most of our history, most of our timeline, fighting or bracing or all of these things. And I think it's really beautiful because if I think about now, there's so many of us that are starting to kind of drop that weight, put down, those things that we've picked up and we've been carrying for many generations. And I see so much more of us playing and, and Ima. And yeah, right. It was a big one when I heard, when I was crying too, when they told me that. So don't worry. But yeah, it's a big deal. And that's like the thing that they want us to do is to play more and really be in, feel that safety in our spirits. So that's one of the reasons too why I was like, I'm not going to be bummed about not going to ceremony. I'm just going to play, right? And remember that and see what comes out of it, right? So it's exciting.
I really like that. I feel like that's art for me, is that playful time that, some of us had to grow up real fast. So you're just serious your whole life, and art is that access point for me, but also to, have that relationship with my child, because that parent child dynamic has been kind of interfered with. So that's art is just a beautiful way to do that. I'm just curious about the STEPS team who are here, if you have anything you want to share or insights or anything from today so far.
Every time we get on a call, this happens. Insights. I mean, I think the thing that was rolling around in my head a lot was I can resonate with a lot of the descriptions you gave of mitigation strategies for burnout. Something that personally I've experienced over the course of the last year is realizing how much of this work is heart work, and kind of that being attracted to this work because of the creative outlet, but then also using all of my creativity through this work for this work and leaving nothing for myself. So the course of the last year, that's something I've been focusing on, making sure that I'm balancing both my work time and my personal time, as well as retaining enough of myself to give to myself. It's just what's in my head right now, but I've heard a lot of the things that you folks have said, and I think Jennifer, Alicia, you're right. There's always there's always room to grow. While it's nice to hear that we as an organization tend to do things pretty good, one of the things that really stuck out in my mind is that the language in the contracts, and this is something that we're focusing on anyway internally, but like really taking the time to go over these things with folks to make sure everyone is sort of on the same page. There's no misunderstanding of or misinterpretation on either side of what these words mean, and seeing if you can come to like an agreement that both protects and honors both sides, right? Without it being extractive to either or competitive or things like that, So, oh, I'm just rambling now. You got me going. But I think, for me, the core is always coming down to being flexible and understanding, we're working with people, not objects. I think I'm pretty lucky in that I'm with STEPS. I have yet to have to work against my own values. But again, there's always things to learn. So I'm looking forward to kind of looking over this recording again with the team. Hopefully not crying, but no promises. And, seeing what we can take from it as an organization, what we can each take from it as individuals, where there are areas to learn and grow, and areas that maybe we can share with others, right? I think that's the big thing about knowledge for me anyway. Its impact or usefulness is limited significantly if it's hoarded, right? These things are meant to be shared. That's why we're here having this conversation. So, Kveen, is there anything that popped into your head? Anything that resonated with you particularly today?
Yeah, I mean, listening to your guys' stories, it's very like enlightening. I think like it makes you think in a different way because you don't normally think about this kind of stuff like as an average person, right? And now that I heard your guys last year as well, the strawberry tea time, and I found a lot of stuff very interesting there as well. And I think, yeah, talking about the contracts and just the way uh you're viewed, and all the stuff that you have to go through. It's very interesting. I think you were saying like somebody said that being able to connect it to yourself and viewing it in a different way. And I think, you know, although like I haven't been through a lot of the stuff you guys have, but being able to connect it to my life and in different perspective, I think that's very, very helpful. And being able to see things from a new point of view. I think it's gonna be very fun to work on this, and it gives me a new appreciation for what we're doing here. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, that's great.
I'm just gonna,
Oh, sorry, go
I
ahead.
just want to say, Ema, just to remind you, water's medicine, right? And like even that is something too that I've noticed is like challenging, like you're saying, the way of thinking, right? Like we live in like this space of, everybody always apologizes for being emotional. And I find that kind of odd because that's like, what are you apologizing for being human? Right? And that I think shows the conditioning of like how we've been taught to like maneuver in spaces. And that's like that part of that heart work, right? Like that's part of the decolonizing the way we think about things, and really getting back to like that connectivity and that relationship, right? And when we're in relationship with each other, we don't, especially in Indigenous communities that are healthy and thriving, like we just don't, we honor each other for being brave and sharing that medicine with each other, right? So just putting that out there. I'm always reminding people whenever they do that, it's like oh sorry, it's like I don't apologize for, I'm like, you're welcome, right? You're welcome for sharing this with me, and thank you for sharing it with me. So miigwech, yeah.
I'm aware that, I mean, I feel like this is such a rich conversation and I could stay here all night, but I am aware that some of us have fur babies and human babies, and dinner would be nice. So if that's all right with all of you, I can close the space here. I hope you feel nourished, and I know my tea is empty, so that you still have your moon water. So, thank you all, like my Star, Lindsey, Shawn, Jennifer, Lisa, and Sukveen, welcome to the family, what I call my From Leeds We Grow family. Thanks for making the time and coming together to accommodate all of our schedules to bring this group together. It's been, as always, wonderful. Thank you for those of you who are watching this, taking the time out of your day to watch this pre-recorded session. I encourage you to go through the captions, the caption area. You'll find some links to the artists directly, some information about upcoming opportunities with the project. But as a gentle reminder, we will be offering From Leeds We Grow through monthly creative sessions from July through October in Roundtree Mills Park. As well, because of our focus on, creating opportunities and offering mentorship and learning, we'll soon be releasing a call for emerging Indigenous creatives or artists to support the project. You can look out for that call, via the STEPS networks in early July. I'm going to do a shameless plug. So of course, check the STEPS social media. It's at STEPS Public Art on all platforms except for Twitter. You can subscribe to our email list. You can find that on our website. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me directly. My name is Ema, spelled IMA. So it's IMA at stepspublicart.org. With any questions or feedback, my inbox is always open. I do need to take a minute to thank the funders for this year, including the Government of Canada through New Horizons for Seniors Program, Arts in the Parks by the Toronto Arts Foundation and funded through the City of Toronto. Park People, Scotiabank, and the Indigenous Arts and Culture Partnership Fund also offered through the City of Toronto. These funders, in combination with our community partners like the Rexdale Community Hub and the Rexdale Walking Group and the Humber Summit Residents Association, really do make these things possible. We do have ongoing support from the Ontario Arts Council and the Government of Ontario as well. So thank you for sharing tea with us. And I really, really hope to see you in the park. We'll chat soon. Bye.
Bye.